All right, we're on chapter 36, Nationalism and Political Identities in Asia, Africa, and Latin America. We're in the second heading, which is Africa. We're in the third subheading, which is African nationalism. So, one of the things to note is that after the Great War, many of the allies thought they would just go back to having these vast colonial empires. So, Britain and France primarily thought, hey, we're going to keep ruling these huge empires. And the colonies weren't necessarily big fans of this. They actually, none of them that I can think of off the top of my head were huge fans of this. They wanted their own. They wanted their own nations, especially after listening to the ideas concerning self-determination by the U.S. President Woodrow Wilson, talking about nations and people being able to take responsibility for themselves politically and make their own decisions. So, who are the people who are going to be really pushing for this in Africa? Well, it's going to be this novel, meaning unique African social class, called the New Elite. And so, what had happened is that this new elite were basically Africans who had a European or from the United States education. That was one of there were many negative things, but one of the positive things for the colonies was that their elite, their best and brightest or well connected people in Africa and other parts of the world, they could travel back to the mother colony. In this case, like we'll talk about Jomo Kenyatta, who's a great example of this. Is he is going to spend 15 years in Europe learning from the best institutions, including like the London School of Economics, kind of like what Gandhi ended up doing. So Kenyatta was very articulate and wanted to make sure that Kenya had independence from the British. We're not there yet. It's going to take a world war, and we'll talk about it later. But his nickname was Mzee. I believe I'm pronouncing that right. I apologize if I'm not. But Mzee meaning like old man, which actually wasn't negative, but it was just showing how wise he was. And so basically wise leader. And so these people were the ones who were working with the colonial governments, with foreign companies, Christian missions. They understood and could move somewhat in European society, and they wanted to have their home countries, basically to have that same independence in their own nation. And so, what many Africans saw was that this European concept of nation really can incorporate a lot of different groups of Africans. And so that concept of kind of like a nation is going to be one that many African intellectuals are going to want to pursue. So to do that, though, you basically have to keep the old colonies boundaries, and we'll talk about that later. Um, some nationalists, though, wanted to look towards the pre-colonial past. Again, there had been hundreds of different, essentially, ethnicities throughout Africa. And so, so there were different ideas of what Africa could look like. Some of them wanted to base things off of ethnicity, religion, languages, or, the idea of race. Okay. And so, again, there were several different, we would today call them like African ethnicities, but different Africans thought they were different races than other Africans, just like basically every other part of the world. So there were some calls for this Pan-Africanism, essentially usually from blacks who had been in the United States or the Afro-Caribbean intellectuals. And this is a product of essentially slavery. So this idea by some of these intellectuals was that, so what was going on in the Americas was that there were basically two categories. You were either kind of white or you were black. And again, I don't have enough time for American race theory. There definitely were different races within that, but the blacks were definitely seeing below that. So to escape that huge persecution and the stereotyping and all those issues, there were some intellectuals like W.E.B. Du Bois and Marcus Garvey who felt like, we got to go back to Africa. Okay. And so they believed that, again, that they didn't have a place in the Americas. They needed to go back to where they were from to be able to reestablish themselves. And your book has a letter, Africa for Africans, which really helps you to understand this idea. All right. Thank you very much. I'll see you in the next video.